Speaking of the offense, by the way, let's talk about the spring game that they had about a week and a half ago or so, and some of the standouts in that game. Now, earlier this month, Oregon State lost Zeriah Beason to Washington State via the transfer portal, and so there's a little bit of a void there, not a massive one, I would say, at the wide receiver position, but there's perhaps an opportunity is a better way to put it for someone to kind of step up, and Silas Bolden might be somebody who could do that.
Bolden's a guy that I'm looking forward to have a breakout season this year. He and Anthony Gould, I think at wide receiver, are the two guys who are really going to benefit from the open spots there, from guys like Trevon Bradford graduating, Zeriah Beason entering the transfer portal, Champ Flemings as well, transferring to Arkansas State. Those are three guys who have started in their careers. So, you've got plenty of roles open for guys to step into. And Silas Bolden was one that really stood out to me in the spring game as somebody who's ready to make that leap. In the red zone lockout drill at the end of the spring game, Oregon State didn't really do a game, so to speak. It was more of kind of a glorified practice. So they did this red zone drill at the end of the practice, and Silas Bolden on both of his drives scored a 25-yard touchdown on the very first play. So, I mean, that's a guy who's making explosive plays in the spring, who I think is going to carry that over into fall camp and potentially lock up a starting gig, if not at least land very highly on the two deep. Anthony Gould being the other one that I mentioned there. He's someone who kind of broke out a little bit last year. He had a huge game early in the year. I want to say against Hawaii, if I remember correctly. I think he received for about 110, 120 yards in that game, if I remember correctly. And then his production kind of tailed off as his playing time diminished, but he's someone who has ran a lot with the first team group this spring, and has a lot of momentum carrying over from last regular season.
We've talked a lot about Oregon State's ability to run the ball, and they've been very good at that and should be again this year with the offensive line. But who are those ball carriers supposed to be this year for Jonathan Smith?
Well, Deshawn Fenwick comes back from last year's squad. He was kind of the primary backup to BJ Baylor, who had one of those Oregon State running back seasons. It seems like every year whether it's Jermar Jefferson, Artavis Pierce. I mean, you could go back to Jaquiz Rogers and down the line. Seems like there's always one guy who's a threat to rush for 1,000 plus, right? BJ Baylor had that year last year, but Fenwick was right there behind him, and was a great change of pace to what Baylor brought. Trey Lowe is also back. He was kind of a third down specialist, got involved in the passing game a little bit as a receiver. So I really like what he brings to the mix. But the guy who stood out among everybody else in spring camp, and this is a guy who I've been high on since the moment I first saw him, is true freshman Damian Martinez, who enrolled early at Oregon State. He came from oh man, I'm blanking on the exact high school name right now, but a big school in Texas. So he's used to being in the spotlight a little bit. This is someone who can run away with the job very early in his career. He was far and away the most productive running back I saw throughout camp over the 5 weeks that I watched practice. And in the spring game, I think, fans kind of got their first look at him and came away very impressed. So Damian Martinez, one of the true freshmen in this conference, I think that's going to kind of take people by storm this year.
Louisville, Texas is the
there it is. Yep.
is the one that you're looking for. I will be honest with you, Carter. I did Google that while you were talking just now. Good though my memory is, it's not that. Yeah. Well, actually, I don't have that great a memory. But anyway, so let's go on the defensive side of the ball. Who are some of the names that have popped out, particularly in the linebacking core for new defensive coordinator Trent Bray? Because there are a couple guys that you texted me about.
Yeah, it's going to start with the inside linebackers this year, as it has every year, as long as Jonathan Smith's been here. Tim Tibesar before Trent Bray implemented this scheme that really relies on the inside linebackers to be they need to be on the ball on every play. That's why you saw Avery Roberts' tackle total so high the last couple of years. Omar Spates in the first couple of years of his career has been right up there with the tackle leaders in the conference. So with Roberts gone, who do you turn to? I think it's two guys in particular, being Kyrie Fisher and Easton Mascarenas, but more so the former there in Fisher, who stepped in a little bit last year, and was kind of a primary backup and had a couple of pretty good games towards the end of the year. He's been with the first team group all spring, and he's someone who I expect very late in his career now, after transferring from Arkansas, to kind of finally flourish in a bigger role. On the edge at outside linebacker, Andre Hughes-Murray is gone after being at Oregon State and he was another one of those 6 or 7 year guys. But Andrew Chatfield, who I mentioned earlier on, that's an instant impact transfer coming in from SEC territory. He was a contributor at Florida very early in his career, I believe as a true freshman. So to bring somebody in with that kind of background, bring him into the Pac-12 and put him on a roster that has struggled on the front seven, I think he's somebody who could stand out as, maybe one of the team MVPs this year. They're certainly going to rely on him. I think he's going to be one of the primary sources of pass rush. On the other side, John McCartan is back from injury. Ryan Franke took a big step forward. Corey Stover's another young guy who I expect to get into the mix. So it's going to be a pretty big rotation, I would guess, at linebacker, particularly on the outside.